Welcome. This is the Founders Atlas, a podcast exploring entrepreneurship around the world through the eyes of visionary founders. I'm your host, Mayuri Reddy. Today, we're traveling to Southern Africa, to Cape Town, South Africa, where today's featured company was born, and to Namibia, where its co-founder now calls home. Cape Town is often seen as one of the continent's startup capitals, an inspiring blend of natural beauty, innovation hubs, and a deep-rooted entrepreneurial spirit. It's also a city shaped by inequality and complexity, where building something meaningful requires more than just hustle. It requires vision and resilience. And Namibia is a land of vast deserts, small towns, and a very small population. Less than 3 million people live in a land area 2.5 times bigger than Germany. It's a country where distance and access are very real challenges, but where the potential for impact is immense. Cerina is the co-founder of Future Females, a global movement that empowers women entrepreneurs with access to community, education, and resources. Cerina and her co-founder Lauren started the company after realizing just how few women were represented in the accelerator program that they were a part of. What began as a simple idea in Cape Town grew quickly into a platform serving women across the globe, from South Africa to Kenya, the Netherlands, and beyond. For years, they focused on doing events in different markets and have recently pivoted to building an education platform catered to women entrepreneurs. I first met Cerina in 2020 when she was living in Berlin and still running Future Females remotely. She started a Future Females chapter here in Berlin, which I served as an ambassador for 3.5 years. When I met her, she was just as kind and thoughtful as she appears in this interview. It was clear that she was a builder with purpose, someone driven not by ego, but by a calling to create space for others. In this episode, Cerina speaks candidly about the disconnect between funders and the reality of women entrepreneurs in Africa, the importance of designing for real-life impact, not metrics, and how her definition of success has evolved. This conversation is a reminder that the work of empowerment isn't flashy, but it is profound, and that building something lasting often means returning to your roots, literally and figuratively. Let's get into it. Welcome. This is the Founders Atlas. Cerina, I'm so excited to have you.
Yeah, me too. I'm so excited about this whole podcast that you're actually doing and all the conversations that you're having. And I'm looking forward to this conversation, since we worked together in 2020 and how life has evolved.
Starting from there, how long were you living in Berlin for?
For about 2.5 years. I left a little earlier because of the COVID lockdown too.
Yeah.
I thought I'll just come home for December. That went on a little bit longer.
Yeah.
For about 2.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how has your experience been kind of living and starting a business in Cape Town, going to Berlin, coming back, and now running your business also semi-remotely from Namibia?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that were kind of playing in our favor. We started Future Females with 2 very strong foundations. So one, Lauren and I knew that we wanted to be able to run our business from wherever in the world. So from the start, we set out systems which made that possible, right? Remote work. The way that we hired teams, the way that we interacted with them, the tools that we implemented from the start made that possible. So, number one, when COVID actually happened and so many companies had to go online, we were kind of like there already.
Yeah.
It wasn't that big a deal for us. So that has made it easy, kind of like our entire existence, number one. Number two, Lauren and I met while we were both associates on an accelerator program for Techstars. Now, Techstars is a US VC who runs accelerators all over the world on specific sectors or industries. And so we met in that program, being very supported then actually in the entrepreneurial space, because we immediately had access to the best mentors in the South African and specifically Cape Town entrepreneurial ecosystem. So when we started it, we could just go to people and say, we're starting this business and we would really just like some advice. Yeah. Can we have a coffee? And what do you advise? What do you recommend, etc.? And so what made the transition to Berlin then also easy was I then joined a Techstars program in Berlin,
Oh, wow,
which
cool.
I was kind of then already number one, part of like this Techstars network. So I could go over and say that, I've got mentors in South Africa. I've got mentors maybe even in the US because, we ask questions to them. We've got this baby, which was actually born out of the Techstars program, because it was in the Techstars program where we met as co-founders, but it was always also there where we identified that from the 10 companies, there were no female founders. And of the 75 people in the program, only 5 were women, and 3 of them were in the project team.
Wow.
Which meant that there weren't even really women working in the tech space, right? So the foundation, and I almost want to say like the cushion that we fell in, both in Cape Town and in Berlin, was really comfortable and very supportive because of this, this launch pad. Yeah.
So kind of going back to it, what drove you and Lauren to believe that this was a big enough of a challenge that you both wanted to tackle? Like, so how, I mean, obviously there's so many different problems that this world has, right? What made you both inspired that this was actually a problem that you wanted to not only tackle, but that you were the right team to tackle it together?
That's a good question. So, like I said, we were inspired by the fact that there were number one, that there were no female founders, right? Number two, I had just completed my MBA, and I'm actually a food scientist by practitioner. So inside the factories with my white mop cap and like gumboots and stuff, I knew that I wanted to move out of that space. Lauren had just immigrated from Australia to Cape Town, and she's actually, she's an entrepreneur in true spirit, and she knew that she wanted to start her own company. So we were both in new ecosystems. She also, I'm from Namibia, so we were both also in new geographies, right?
Yeah.
And we both were like, okay, what is the next phase of our lives? And I just entered this entrepreneurial space. She knew she wanted to be there. And so we started looking for mentors, people that we can connect with. And that's where we saw the gap in Cape Town. And we were like, where do women go to? And so in Techstars, or while we were working together on this project, we kind of like realized, hey, we're looking for the same thing. And we said to each other, well, if we're looking for it, maybe there's some other woman like us who's also looking for it. So let's start. And that is why it started with the community, because it started with hosting events to get women together, to give them access to successful entrepreneurs, or like workshops, or coaches, mentors, funding opportunities, the resources, and also get to know each other, so that, hey, I'm going through this and I don't know which tool to use, or like sometimes just the entrepreneurial journey of like, I don't feel good enough for this, and like, how do I, and so that's the one thing, or like the second thing maybe. The third thing was that the reason that we were motivated or excited about online education, and then also doing it remotely, was that, so I'm again from Namibia, which is a massive country where with very few people, but also towns. So most people live on farms, and towns are like 150, 250 kilometers from each other, right?
Wow.
And so my mom is a single mom. My dad died when I was really young. So my mom raised all 3 of our kids alone. So I had the example of a single mother in this area having to raise her kids alone. So my motivation to help educate women to start their own businesses in a remote way was, I know these women on farms or in these very remote areas that want to start something to earn their own money, but they don't know how, right? And I wanted to make it accessible to them. So that's why the education, and then why it was online. Lauren, coming from Australia and Indonesia and Bali, was a pure computer or laptop on the beach with a cocktail kind of vibe call. And she wanted to maintain that.
I love that.
And also like that, make that accessible for others, right? Yeah. And so that was her motivation. So our motivation were 2 very different ones, but completely supporting each other and different personalities and people in our community. Now, also, the other thing that we noticed when we started doing a little bit of research on women was that there were two things that also were a gap. So the number one was women wanted to start a business, so they had an idea, but they didn't know how to do this, right? So they needed the guidance. The other thing was that they knew exactly what to do, but they didn't have the confidence or the grit to just start doing it. And so that's why the holistic side of, support and community, that's why we brought that in then too. So yeah, those things were all into this aquarium of fish and animals and everything, and why we did it and how we did it. Yeah.
That's amazing. I really love that both you and Lauren had pretty much opposite ends of who you were trying to maybe serve when it comes to why you created that flexibility. But at the same time, all the same, it really did allow you to have a really big addressable market, so to speak, because you really could speak to so many different types of people, because what you're actually doing in the programming and the education is very applicable to not just women, but really anybody who's curious about becoming an entrepreneur. How did Cape Town shape the way that you built Future Females? Because of course you started it with events, but you did grow it into something that obviously became a much bigger program. So how did Cape Town shape the way you built that? And how did you know when it was time to take the next step from events to something more than that?
I admit, one of the beautiful things for me about our story is that our vision never changed. Someone else also asked that to us the other day, actually someone in our team. We're talking about pivots and different things, and we said, we're still guided by the same values and by the same mission than what we started with. The influence of Cape Town, again, I think the fact that we were both from this Techstars program made it very easy for us. And Cape Town, it probably still is, but at that stage was a very big hub. It was at that stage definitely the biggest hub for entrepreneurs. And because of the beauty that it is, I mean, you've traveled there also, and the energy that's there, there's a lot of international people also there, right? And so once we kind of found these mentors or coaches that were available to us, they then also introduced us, and often that would have been international people also. They would say, you know what, why don't you have a chat to this person? They come once a year for 3 months and they work on this. This is their business. Why don't you have an exploration call with them? And they would give us some guidance. So that was really, really helpful too. I also think that the fact that people in Cape Town are very, I want to call it adventurous, maybe, but also in the spirit of they wanted to attend new things, and women wanted to learn. 2017 also, when we started it, was just the beginning of that wave of female support, right? So it's almost as if Future Females was started at the right time. Yeah. And I do always say that, in some ways then we were lucky, right? But going back then also to our vision and our mission that what we wanted to create always stayed the same. In those first 3 weeks, Lauren and I spent a lot of time together because also we were strangers, right? I'm from Namibia. She's from Australia. So there were some things that we really had to put strong foundations in place to build this business as two strangers together, right? One of the things were our values. We had to decide on values that we were both committed to, which will guide our decision making. And it has been our guidance, because often then we'll go she's got an opinion and I've got an opinion, but then we go okay, if we both don't know, let's go back to the value, and what would the value then make us live, which is beautiful. But we knew that education would be a thing. So even though we started with community then and events, we knew that at a stage we would want to educate. Our mentors, I must admit, also guided us to that. So in the beginning, we were all about free because we were excited and we just wanted to support. And they were the ones that actually said, okay, now you have proved yourself. Now you must start charging. Lauren and I also have different ways of approaching our relationships, our network, and the way we do business, which is also good. But I think one of the things that I always wanted was that I build relationships in such a way that we're not always in touch. I'm grateful that we have that because of that launchpad. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's like when you have, like those best friends that you don't ever see, you live maybe across the world from each other. I know I have several of those after living in Berlin for the last few years where, we don't see each other very often anymore. But the second we see each other, it's as if no time's passed. We don't really need to go through the pleasantries that would maybe, it's almost like you go through the pleasantries when you're more of an acquaintance or not as close of a friend with somebody. But when you're really close with somebody, you kind of, I want to say you have like an unspoken language a bit, but it just feels very easy to just go into it and they can kind of read you. Because I'm sure there's been many times where Lauren has been overwhelmed with something and needs a little bit more from you, or vice versa, where you need a little bit more from her and you're able to just sort of, look, I can't do it right now, or she's able to do the same. And you can be like, okay, I got you. Like, don't worry about it. We'll be able to balance each other out. And having that strong co-founder relationship, I'm sure, has been really instrumental in Future Females' growth.
Oh my gosh, you are completely correct. I'm actually getting goosebumps as you're saying this, because it is one of the most important relationships of my life, or in my life. And I would never have imagined that it would evolve into this. And the type of relationship that it is, I give lots of honor and love and respect for the being that she is in my life. And it hasn't always been easy because we are two different people, and I moved across the world to Berlin, like you said, but there's some support, and I'm really grateful for that.
I'm glad that you have that. I mean, I'm sure if Lauren's listening, Cerina loves you. Now that you've sort of done this, kind of making the shift into the online education, what are some of the maybe challenges or opportunities that you've been seeing, not just for entrepreneurs in Namibia or South Africa, but maybe across the entire region, maybe in other markets that you are, quite prominent within? What are some new challenges that you're now facing as you expand into this new sector, or this new stage of the business?
So I think I'll maybe, just to give context to the listener, Future Females got these, or we also work with governments who want to support women in the programs that we run. So now we work very closely with them in like their targets and reaching that. We are executing programs in Brazil, Indonesia, Kenya, Nigeria, Namibia, South Africa, and a lot of SADC countries. And as you said, now we've got the online platform, which has, from Saudi representation and some from Europe. What has been very interesting in these programs, Miri, is that we often work with these partners who have an expectation when we come with a proposal. And this doesn't always align with what is really going on in reality in the world or in this country, or the needs. And so I think, they are very driven by what they must report to government, right? And sometimes I just feel like I wish that you would listen to what our real proposal is, because we've been doing this for 7 years. And the learnings and the recommendations that we say or that we give is really, really coming from the entrepreneur and from our experience. But what happens is when we do these proposals, we must kind of like fit into what they want. And so what happens then is that these programs get executed and we don't really move the needle for as many people as we could. And I think that is a big gap. And I've got so many examples in that. And you might have, when you ask this question, or actually I've spoken about the entrepreneur itself and what the entrepreneur maybe needs. But I think this just jumps to mind because immediately I'm thinking about our partners who's making this possible, but how the impact that we're trying to have isn't always as much as we hope it to be because of these constrictions and constraints from the partners that we should be serving. So I think that's quite a big thing. We are obviously impact driven. So we want to be able to, in every single person who we're working with in a program, we want to say at the end, we helped you move the needle with this. And that's not always possible.
And would you have an example maybe of an experience that has happened where, organization you've worked with has come to you with a request where you've been able to go back and say, that's not actually possible, or that's not really how this works? And what was your response to that?
Yeah. Actually, one of our recent program, to be very, very honest, we were asked to get 50 female entrepreneurs in the circular economy space. All must be youth, which is between 18 and 35 years old, and they must come from the rural area. Now, I don't even know if the rest of the world has a definition for rural as we have it in Africa, but we tried. We tried to do that. We tried to get the recruitment 50 people, but we also went back to them and we said, let's just quickly be honest with you. And number one, people in the rural areas don't even know what circular economy is, right? If you want, maybe tell them waste management or refurbish or something like that, then maybe they would understand. But the concept or the theme circular economy, they don't even know. Number two is that just youth in this, I can understand that if you live in Berlin, that the youth are very excited about the circular economy. And there's lots of ideas around it and, reducing waste and like refurbishing and keeping it in the circular economy, right?
It's something that they're being educated about. So of course there's going to be excitement to not
Lots of
only,
ideas.
they're going to come to you almost rather than you have to seek them out in that same way.
For sure. However, in Africa and then in the youth space, you won't really find that. What you would find is people or women who has been working in an industry for a long time and actually has really been able to see the gaps and all the waste and all the wrongs in a business, who then decides, hey, I want to make a difference here. I want to change this. I want to have less waste. I want to move this into or change this into something new that can be used. Or I want to keep it in a circular economy. So those are mostly experienced women. And funny enough, in this program that we got, even lots of them were highly educated women with doctorates and stuff that said that we've been working, lots of them in mines and going like, I've done all this work so much and now I want to give back in a different way. So that was a really good example of they wanted to have circular economy, rural areas, age, youth. And we were like, you're not going to get them there. What you should rather, and what they wanted was these companies should be funding ready. Now, to be funding ready means that you should have been operational for a while because you should have a validated product. You should have your due diligence in place to get funding to show a ROI. And we were like, guys, if you were in the rural areas, these people don't even have a business plan. They don't have accounting. They don't have financial statements. And so we said that all of these requirements doesn't fit into one program. If you want to focus on the rural areas and you want to focus on the youth, let's do awareness. Let's do, mostly awareness. Let's do small scale education of this is what the circular economy is. Or then someone has an idea, let's help them with their accounting. Let them understand what is a budget, how should they, so that we can move them then in the funnel over the next probably 3 years, because it takes quite some time. So those were really interesting requirements and expectations that we had to go back to. And it's a difficult play, right? Because number one, we would really love to help this ecosystem. We would love to help these entrepreneurs. Sometimes also we would say, let's use your funding for less people and have more impact. But the numbers are so important for the government reporting. So it's a very interesting dance and space to actually move in.
It's super interesting to think about also where they're getting these parameters from, right? So you're saying as well, like they have these very strict guidelines, but how are they coming up with those guidelines? Is that from being on the ground and understanding what the ecosystems are like and what people can do? Or is it just kind of copy and pasting that from an ecosystem that's more developed and just assuming it's there? I guess my question would be if you were speaking to a VC or a government agency that's looking to create more prosperity through entrepreneurship in these regions, what do you think that they really need to do in order to do that effectively? Does that require them to be on the ground? Do they need to partner with more organizations? Do they need to do more research? Or is there something else that you would suggest to kind of be more impactful with their work?
That's a really good question. And I'm going to give my opinion. I might be slapping some people on the fingers here. I think my biggest recommendation would probably be for them to, sit around a table and have discussions and really trust the feedback that is given. Future Females has hosted 2 roundtable events with our 2 most recent programs. And the one, we invited more people from the ecosystem when we gave feedback on the learnings of the program. And why we did that was to say, like, let's invite other accelerators to also hear if the findings that we got are the same as them. And let's get other funding partners so that they can hear back from us and these other partners so that it's really beneficial for the entire ecosystem, these discussions, right? My question would be, what do the people do when they leave those sessions? Do they actually take notes and actually go and consider them? Or did they actually just tick this off as it was a breakfast and a roundtable discussion about the ecosystem and nothing really happens with that?
Yeah, just making sure they have it checked marked that they did it, showed their face, and no one can question them that they didn't try.
Yeah, right. Our last program's roundtable, we didn't invite the ecosystem. What we did then was we invited the participants and the coaches. And I actually said, don't think that I'm sitting in this room. Be very honest with the funder about what you enjoyed about the program, so what worked, but also what prevented you from being successful in this program. I asked the coaches to say, what prevented you from helping these participants? And it was a really fiery discussion, if I can call it that, because people really shared their things. And I mean, we have one of the ladies in this circular economy who works in the textile industry, and she explained how much textile is being dumped every single day and how her problem isn't actually not even in the industry. It's on government level, so policy makers. And so she needs much more support. And we walked out of that session with a lot of learnings and recommendations, but some of them really, really deeply rooted systemic. Yes. And so that is where almost like our hands are cut off and we kind of like trust that this government body will now go and say, what next? And so my recommendation would probably be first, like, have these conversations, trust the feedback that you're getting from the ecosystem. I'm asking the ecosystem to be honest. Let's not just paint pretty pictures. Let's not just come and like give good results. Let's be honest about the results. 2 years ago, Andy funded us for a funding program, which we're focusing on Namibia, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, and I can't remember the 5th country now. And they wanted to help 200 women get funding. We could only recruit 73 that was ready to be taken into that program. And we were honest. We, in that phase, that first phase, we said, we only have so much. We could only find so many women that's actually coachable, helpable. And so, strictly speaking, we failed the first phase of the program, but we were rather honest.
Was that honesty met with acceptance? Like, were they like, okay, that's great?
Yeah. I must admit, for that partner, it was really good. And throughout that whole program, so it's a lovely report to read. So,
one quick question to follow up with that. Were you afraid to be honest in that report? Like, were you worried that might have any impact on future?
Yeah.
What made you and Lauren decide to be like, you know what, let's be honest here?
Our board member is is a big grant person too. And she actually advised us. And she said, you know what? Be honest. And then we were honest, and it went well. So I think thank you to Shirley there for guiding us and just saying, yes, it's going to be okay. Be honest. And
So I'm a VC coming from a market like Sweden. Okay. Like, let's say I'm from an early stage VC firm in Sweden and I want to come into South Africa. It's a BRICS country. I'm curious about it. What do I do, right? How do I go about entering this market without coming in and just not only just wasting my time and energy, but having a proper context into what's going on? So again, like, who are the people we need to speak to? What are the types of organizations that I need to get in contact with, if at all? I mean, what is that process going to be like for me to come into it from a completely different market with no context into what's actually happening in the market?
Yeah. So I just spoke about, the partners, the funding partners in like the governments. And so, like you mentioned, the VCs also entering a new market. VCs is an interesting thing for me, Mary. What we've noticed in Future Females is that most of our businesses are not a VC case. The sad truth about that is that we don't even make like the minimum ticket size. And the sad thing about that is that there's this massive gap of entrepreneurs that can't get their business off the ground because they don't have the funding to like get it there where it's fundable. No one wants to support them there. So they've got a validated product, but now they need talking in Namibian dollars or South African rand, maybe they need like 150K, let's say 4,000 euros. Just 4,000 euros that they need to get some equipment to start distribution. And then VCs will say, oh, but the ticket size is 3 million. And you go like, they don't even know. And so my advice to VCs is to really look at their ticket sizes, to be very honest, if they want to enter the African market. We don't need the big amounts of money that they have in ticket sizes. And if they really, really, really want to support an entrepreneur, then they must look at the needs. There's some data around this for sure that they can get. And we worked with a partner, I can't remember their name now, but they're from Kenya, who does a lot of funding research. So they can probably get a report from them. But then if a VC wants to enter this market, I think one of the questions that they should ask and do some markets research is, what type of businesses are people running in this country? And are these businesses that they are interested in? Like really, really. Number two, linking with the first one, but is this business model the one that you want to be in? So not just the sector, but also this business model. Mm-hmm. Because we know that VCs are mostly funding tech businesses. Yeah. We know that they are mostly looking for a ROI, and they're mostly looking for unicorns in like a specific way. Like they're not really open to, I'm going to call it traditional businesses, and they're not looking for impactful businesses. Mm. And that's the kind of businesses that African women, at least, are running. And so for VCs, I would say do that research. And then the third one is do research on the amount that women need. Yeah. And if your your current ticket size doesn't provide for that, maybe think about another product so that you can provide for that if you really want to help.
Yeah.
If you're only there to make money, then admit that,
Yeah.
you know? And if you can, then maybe introduce a type of an angel or a type of another funding opportunity. That would be my advice to a VC, actually.
I love it. Be honest. Be
Yes.
honest about what it
I
is that
do.
you're looking for. But I mean,
Yeah.
isn't that so funny that that seems like such a straightforward answer to such a simple question, right? Like, just be honest about what you actually want out of coming here. I think there's obviously, you lived in Berlin. You obviously have lived in Cape Town uh, every year now, especially I feel like this year. I mean, I will be in Cape Town as well, but there's a huge influx of people who are coming from Europe, from all these different big European cities that all come down to Cape Town for winter, right? It's the same time zone, makes an amazing sort of remote working experience because you get to be in summer weather and you don't have to change anything about the timing of your meetings. And there's a lot of people coming from Europe to also co-work. What's interesting though is I think right now people are starting to do a bit more work to try and get these founders together and to network. But I am very curious of how many of the people who are coming from Europe as VCs are doing a lot to really understand Cape Town as a city outside of Camps Bay, Clifton, Sea Point, and Gardens, right? Like, are they leaving their little bubble of the city to really understand what's going on around them? And I feel like that's a little bit of the thing that I hope more VCs and investors who are coming to or curious about Africa think about it a little bit more of am I actually doing the work to understand what's going on in this market, or am I just sort of jumping the gun of, oh, everyone's going to Africa now, so I got to go to Africa too, and applying the same strategy that you used in Brussels to a country that 30 years ago was under apartheid. Like, there's so many things that have happened that shape the cultural fabric of the way that these founders are building their businesses. And if you don't work to understand that, how do you expect to really build something that will be sustainable? So I do think that you touch on something which is really great, which is honesty. I feel like I haven't been in very many, at least I haven't seen yet, very many instances where investors are actually asking those sorts of questions and being honest about what they don't know. And I hope that there is more, cross collaboration of someone going to you, Cerina, and saying, hey, like, I'm curious about coming into Namibia and doing some work there. Tell me what I need to do. Would you want to be a consultant for me and help me out with this? I feel like that's such an honest way to say you don't know what's going on, but a really powerful way to find out the right answer. So I hope that more investors or anybody who's fascinated by expanding the markets where they're investing are doing.
You know what's interesting about this too is that if we think about this from a business point of view, and we respect the fact that a VC is also a business and all that they really want to do is just like any other business, make money.
Right.
I want to keep reminding myself that they are a business. Cerina, they're a business. They want to make money, just like you want to make money out of your business. But I think also that the world has this idea that VCs are actually there because they want to help entrepreneurs. They want to help them start their business, launch their business, scale their business. So it's more like they see them as these, what do you call it when someone helps people, like philanthropists?
Yeah.
They almost see them. The world almost sees them as philanthropists, but they're not that. And I think sometimes I need to remind myself about that. And I wonder if I should remind my community about that too.
Yeah.
Right? In this last program where we focused on funding as much, I got an entrepreneur who did a fundraising round. Yeah, who's got VC investment. And she actually said to my entire program that you shouldn't get VC funding. So I think also what would be valuable is, number one, that people understand funding options.
Yeah.
But also funding requirements, right? What is out there? What is available as that? Then also that you should know that it's not only VCs out there that is a funding option,
Absolutely.
right? And
kind of touching on it a little bit of, Future Females has now existed for over 7 years. And obviously part of the reason why Future Females came into existence is because you also wanted to empower more people to become entrepreneurs, right? And obviously VC funding for in many ways is a huge conduit for people being able to build their business. But there hasn't actually been over the last 10 years any change. I'm thinking of organizations in Berlin like Founderland, which is an incredible organization for women of color. Chief, I'm just think like things that are coming on the top of my head right now. All of these organizations came out of what you were also saying you and Lauren built, which was this desire to create these communities that support women in building these ventures. In your opinion, even though you've done all this work, do you think that there is a bigger kind of elephant in the room that maybe needs to be addressed, that the work that you're doing is limited to? Like, for example, or maybe is there a bigger elephant in the room that we need to now kind of tackle? We've been working on community, we've been working on building resources. These things are great, but is there something, what's the next thing that we need to talk to in order to make change in this percentage of funding that's going to women? And if you don't have an answer, honestly, I think that that's the problem. I don't think anyone has an answer.
I don't have the answer. And I keep saying that it's good questions, but I mean, this is such a important conversation that you and I are having.
Yeah.
Because we are very honest in saying this. Because yes, I sometimes look and I think we haven't done anything since 2017. They were very famous entrepreneurs in Kenya who I met now over the last couple of years, who has in the last 2 years all gone back to corporate because they were just like, there's stability in that. There's not that big an expectation from me in that. I don't struggle as much. In Kenya, we had a program. Yeah, we had a program. And so this lady she developed an app to help fishermen, to connect fishermen and buyers, right? So actually Amazing. It was like kind of like a marketplace for it, right?
Yeah.
Really, really great. Like it wasn't even at a city, so it was really helpful in that area and super scalable. But she wanted to get funding and she had no collateral. So the bank literally said to her, no, she had to go to her husband. So again, she couldn't have done this alone, right? If she didn't have a husband, she doesn't have collateral. Wow. And so we're in 2024 actually, and this is happening. So then I ask myself, how is this different to 2017? And we are now in a next wave. The focus is not on women anymore. We might say that it might still be a target for some VCs, parts of like the government deliverables, but there's new things that there's a new wave of what the world is focusing on right now. We know that. Actually, someone also said that yesterday. She said, we had to get support for women. It was needed. It was really needed.
Absolutely.
And I think we did. I do think that we made a difference. If we think about the whole existence of humanity forever and ever, these couple of years were impactful. The same as there were years in the 60s and the 70s where there were big changes for women, right? So I think if we look at it in a bigger scale, then yes, the support was good. The ripple effect was good. Even if we think about education in these remote areas, maybe that business failed, but the entrepreneurial spirit, the way that people do problem solving, the way that they ask questions or maybe educate their children now to then live a different life. I think the ripple effect would be like that. And I feel like I'm like hammering on like the funders of this world. Yeah, there's no real support. If they wanted to help women, then they would look at what is needed and they would create what is needed.
Yeah.
But they give a product and they say, you must fit this. And that is the worst business case, that you have no product market fit, right?
Yeah, of course. Well, I think what I think is so interesting is like, I've gone on a rant lately about this topic just because it really does create something where I feel low-key and anger about, because it's actually just crazy, right? It used to be one of those things where I remember initially when I would try and talk about the topic, I'd be like, okay, well, why don't we just go to the stats? Why don't we just go why don't we just take all these McKinsey reports that we have that show that women are better leaders? Why don't we take this report over here that says that women lead more profitable businesses? Like, I think by and large, women founders are better leaders, have been proven to lead companies to greater success, and are just by far better contributors to the greater ecosystem in society when they are running businesses and running countries, might I add. So we have all this information, right? Like we have all the proof points. How do we change people's minds about this? Like, it feels so obvious to you and me that if you want to encourage more women entrepreneurship, you need to find the communities that women are in. And I'm sure you will find great women founders that are exactly what you're looking for. Or you need to provide more education, or there needs to be more systemic work done around, terms like, imposter syndrome that really sort of plague women more than men. But nevertheless, what are we doing to create these communities that can, lead to greater amounts of women becoming entrepreneurs? That seems very obvious to me and you. And I wonder sometimes if it's an altruistic feeling of like just believing that it's the right thing to do, or if there are, VCs or, angels or family offices who are looking to invest that maybe just aren't doing really the work to try and think through it more critically, or if there is still some deep-seated patriarchy and misogyny going on that really is the problem. And then we get back again to the same thing that the founder you were speaking to that was working in the textile industry goes to, which is it's not about just textiles, it's systemic, right? And how do you fight a systemic problem like that?
Yeah. I mean, I'll probably just repeat what you say, but I just find it very sad that we don't just want to admit this, right? And, Lauren and I said from the beginning, because we've had beautiful mentors who were men, right? And even in our careers, we had managers and supervisors that taught us a lot of what we know. And I mean, we both are married. We love our husbands. And so men play very big roles in our lives. So it's not like we said we never want to, make this gap bigger between men and women or make the one better than the other. For me, the fact about Africa is that it is the African woman running this continent, actually. So not from politics, right? But it is the woman who's the main money maker in Africa, actually. She's the one that maintains the household. Yeah. This is the truth. This is the real, honest truth. And so if anyone wants to come and help Africa, someone in Africa, or relieve or like make changes, then you need to know that.
Yeah.
And you need to know what kind of businesses are these women running? What are they creating? And if you really want to help them, then help them there. And I think when VCs say that, oh, we're going to Africa because Africa is the next big thing, it's definitely not from the point of view that you and I are looking at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I will say, if it makes you feels a little bit better, but when I became an ambassador for Future Females, I'd actually been working for Shopify, if you remember, and I was trying to actually build a partnership between Shopify and Future Females, and then I got laid off from my job very unexpectedly. And then I was like, okay, that sucks. And at the time I was already speaking to you, and I was like, actually, I would really love to get involved in what you're building. I studied entrepreneurship in college, but I had, for the longest time, and still, I think something I'm still battling with, of putting it on this, I'll build a business when blank is perfect, right? Like when I figured out blank, right? And it was actually through being an ambassador for Future Females, I started to realize, like, okay, I'm also putting on these events that are two founders that are in Berlin. Am I also not believing the messaging that I'm actually trying to spread to other people? And I think that there is a big problem of, like, there is a lot of unlearning that has to happen. And I think a lot of the unlearning has to happen because, again, there's a lot of things in society that do push women to have specific ideas about what they need to be in order to be successful, or what they need to do in order to start a business. I'm not going to place the blame on any specific person or thing. It's just, it is a fact of the matter. But I will say it's been through programs like Future Females. It's been through work of even Founderland, which is a great organization I mentioned previously that's in Berlin. Like I remember when I applied for even Founderland, I was like, I can't really apply for Founderland because I'm not a founder yet. And at this point, I'd already been in Future Females as an ambassador for 3.5 years. And I had been somebody who studied entrepreneurship and I had ideas that I wanted to bring to light. And I still could not see myself as a founder. Even writing on LinkedIn, founder of this podcast, was a little bit scary for me. So I do think that there is a lot to be said about the work that you and Lauren are doing, about the work that so many of these organizations have done. But I think now the work needs to be done from these investors who have been trying to say that they want to have more diverse or better investments. I'll tell you right now, invest in a woman, you're going to get better returns. I hope that the folks that are looking to invest in different companies, I hope that the folks that are curious to figure out who their next co-founder should be, I think you need to just broaden your horizons a little bit and challenge your preconceived notions about what a founder looks like, because you'll be pleasantly surprised by how many talented women are really ready to take the helm. And I hope that we shift this narrative because it's exhausting. I don't want to keep having this conversation in 10 years that 3% of VC funding is still only going to women. Like, come on, this is ridiculous.
So I always want to ask, ecosystem, grant people, VCs, accelerators, talk about this, co-working spaces, talk about this where you explain this to the funders to say, oh, you all have business hours. So they don't also know what type of funding is applicable for them. And then lastly is like where to find these VCs and these funding opportunities. And, this goes back to networking, which is great. Open yourself up maybe to a space where they can come and speak with you and meet you and have discussions with you.
Absolutely.
Or if you are at these networking events, maybe be open. This presenter said, always go into a group. She called it the tripod technique. She said, go into a technique where there's an uneven number, because mostly people are kind of like talking in pairs. And so then you can go in there, right?
Okay.
Right now, we are talking about the VC space. And I mentioned this before where I said, they look at and in the tech ecosystems more. And so I want to remind and maybe invite entrepreneurs to remember that everything doesn't need to be a tech business. And that you could be very successful running traditional businesses. I think where you are now, I think you're in India right now, right? And I'm right now in Namibia. And so I think, not that I've never been to India, but I think we have very good examples where you and I are geographically right now of very good, very strong, very profitable businesses run in traditional ways, run from traditional ideas.
Yep.
And I want to say to entrepreneurs listening to this that you don't have to go the route that the world has painted entrepreneurial success. I guess I can just leave it there. So that they can just go with that. But I do want to remind them that, hey, you can be running. Go with that idea. Build your traditional business. Don't get VC funding. Build it. And don't be ashamed about that. Don't think that you are any less than Mark Zuckerberg. If you are building a business that is profitable, that you can live off, and that you are having a happy life, then you are doing great. And I support you.
Absolutely. My last question, what your personal definition of success is.
Yeah, it definitely has evolved. At a stage, my measure of success was always on deliverables and achievements, right? Right now, my life looks very, very different. And probably have 5 things right now that I wrote it down actually yesterday. I journaled about it. So it's so funny that you ask this right now. My biggest indicator is Do I have a regulated nervous system? Is my body mobile and flexible to carry me as I'm now aging? Because I just turned 40, and so am I strong enough to carry myself, and I'm mobile and stuff? Does the people who I love know that they are cherished by me? Is my husband happy? And do my dogs sleep on their back because they feel that safe? So those are my 5 indicators of success. And if I can say yes to all of those, then it's a tick.
It's amazing. Oh, I love that. Also, the dog one's so cute. And
Yeah.
I don't know if listeners know this, but you basically live like on like a farm, right?
Yeah. I live on a little like plot outside a town, a coastal town. So I'm actually in the desert, in the Namib Desert, a small little plot. And we've got a homestead going here. We're trying to live a sustainable, self-sustainable life. We've got our garden. And yeah, so very, very different, I guess, to the full-time tech life that I lived at a stage, but a beautiful transition in my life, which I'm appreciating that I have the opportunity to explore this too.
I remember we met, 4 years ago, and how different your life is from 4 years ago, when you were in cold Berlin. I remember you being like, it's really cold here. I don't know what I'm doing. And look at you now, 4 years later, you're living in the desert with a partner you love and your dogs, and you're running a business that you cherish so much with your best friend. So I think that sounds pretty great.
Yeah, yeah, really. I'm grateful and thankful. Thank you for asking me and giving me this time and also I think it's a great podcast and conversations that you're going to have and host and offer everyone. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate you being on the podcast, and I think listeners are hopefully going to get a very candid, real look at what it's like to do the work that you're doing, and it's not easy work. It's really challenging and emotionally a lot to bear, to being able to advocate for a group of people to be able to have equity. So I hope that listeners realize that. And if there is anybody who wants to get involved, what's the best way that they can support your work and Future Females?
So best is probably either email us at hello@futurefemales.co. But they can also find us on Instagram. We have a pretty strong Instagram account and very, very reactive on it. So we'll get back to them, through that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. I will put the information for Future Females website and the Instagram in the show notes. Amazing. Thank you so much, Cerina. Thank you for taking the time to do this. It's meant so much.
Thanks, Miri. And good luck with the rest, huh?
Thanks for tuning into the Founders Atlas. I hope you enjoyed the ride. To learn more about Future Females, head to our show notes for information about their Instagram, their website, and an email you can reach out to Cerina directly on. And of course, if you can subscribe, give us a rating, anything you can do to share some love for the podcast, it means so much more than you know. Tune in next week as we travel to Cairo, Egypt.